Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Business Applications NYC event of the year. A little bit late to start. This was originally planned for January, but better late than never. As usual, we're joined by the members of the NYC Business Applications User Group and NYC Power Platform User Group. I'd like to thank Joel Lindstrom for agreeing to deliver a session on Power Automate Robotic Process Automation, or RPA. We've been trying to get this session on for the last few months, so it's great that we can finally do it. I also want to thank the organizing committee, Mihir Shah, Aaron Fishman, Arun Vinod, and myself, Eric Levin. During the presentation, if you can, please keep yourself muted to allow everyone to hear better and remove some of the background noise. You can ask questions at any time in the chat window or by raising your hand in Teams, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So let us give a warm welcome to Joel, who probably needs no introduction, but just a little bit is okay. Joel is a 14 times Microsoft Business Applications MVP, even probably before it was called Business Applications, as well as a recognized FastTrack Solution Architect for I'm not sure how many years. He's also okay. He's also a trainer, speaker, podcaster, blogger, and everything else that you can think of. He works for Hitachi Solutions of America as a senior director of low code. Joel, anytime that you would like to start, please go ahead.
Yeah, let me make sure the screen share works. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit more about what I do in my day job. I work for Hitachi Solutions in North America, and I've been at this company for 15 years. I joke that I'm like the furniture. When I started, we were called Customer Effective back in 2007. And I've had just about every job you can have on our professional services delivery team. I love the people I work with, and life continues to bring me new challenges. I originally was on the Dynamics 365 team and was the first architect on that team. And then it was 2016, I think it was, an MVP summit. They showed us the preview of what would become Power Apps and Microsoft Flow. And I was just blown away. I mean, I've been doing quote unquote low code and dynamics for years at that point, and just seeing the potential of the connectors and all the things you could do. Of course, then it was a lot of rough edges. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember back like 2013, 2014, using this thing on Windows Phone, that project, I don't remember what it was called, but it was kind of a very rudimentary low code app thing that kind of inspired Power Apps. And so I've always seen the value in that. And then starting in like 2018, really when CDS 2.0, when the Dynamics database became the common data service, that's when our customers really became interested, because that's really when it grew up to where enterprise companies were interested in it. And it just became a landslide since then. So going back about 2 years ago, we established or started at the point established now, 2 years later, we have a practice that has about 30 people between offshore India and North America, of people focused on the Power Platform. We have, I think it's 14 business applications and Power Platform MVPs at Hitachi Solutions. I think that's more than all the other North American partners added together. And through that, my focus exclusively is the Power Platform, which includes apps and automation, including Power Automate Desktop. So let's first of all talk about what Power Automate Desktop is and why you should care about it. And I'm going to get into some real demos here as far as real scenarios, show some of the more common actions you have. This is kind of going to be an introduction to it. What I would say is if you're interested in using it, I would hope everybody would be. There are some great learning materials on Microsoft Learn and other places like that. So first of all, when you hear people talk about Power Automate Desktop, they'll use PAD for short. for Power Automate Desktop. What is it? So Power Automate Desktop is Microsoft's robotic process automation, RPA tool for desktop automation. Now, a lot of people know Power Automate, formerly called Microsoft Flow, is cloud-based workflows, connectors, all that stuff. This isn't a replacement for this. This is complementary to those and works seamlessly with it, which we'll talk about. What this is Microsoft acquired a tool or a vendor called Win Automation about 2 years ago. Now, their platform was already integrated with Cloudflows, so it was not a totally new thing, but they've rebranded, enhanced the platform, changed the look and feel to be more like Cloudflows, and further integrated so it's seamlessly integrated. This is for things other than API-based automations. So desktop applications, other things. We'll talk about a couple things, but it's got over 400 actions, a lot of very common desktop and local system actions around Excel, scraping websites, other things, including running PowerShell scripts, Python, VB script, SAP scripts, other things like that. We'll talk about how it can be run attended or unattended, and where it fits in with Cloudflows and compared to some of the other well-known RPA vendors like UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere. So why RPA? For years, we in the Power Platform community, I think we talked down about RPA a little bit because Microsoft's focus, and it still is in a big way, has been traditionally on cloud automation. And there are a lot of good points to be made of that if you have an API, that's a more resilient way to do an automation or an integration because if you're talking about RPA, you're talking about things like screen scraping, you're talking about automating through the front end typically, but there are ways to do like Python and PowerShell and other things, but typically you're talking about simulating what a user would do sitting in front of a screen. And so why should we now care about RPA? Well, the reality is there are a lot of systems out there that don't have APIs. So for example, legacy systems, but websites you go to. I mean, you go to your bank. Typically, a lot of banks, you don't have an API you can connect to, or it's very limited who can do it. Amazon. You would think Amazon, with Amazon Web Services, everything would be an API. But certain types of Amazon stores, I have customers that sell a lot of things through Amazon stores, and some of their stores, there's no way to connect in through an API. So that's very legitimate cases where if you can't do RPA, you miss out on a lot of automation. There's also a lot of local system operations. So I want to check the ink in the printer, and some printers do support web type integration, but there's a lot that don't. Whereas you could run a PowerShell script or something to check it. Local systems or equipment integrations. Think manufacturing companies that have equipment with meters and things like that. And there's also some. In many systems, in Microsoft systems, take Excel or Outlook, there are functions that you can't do through the API, whereas you can through the front end. Or there might be an API, but you might not have access to it, or it might cost you money to use it. So Salesforce, SAP, they have different tiers of customers or different tiers of access you have, where if you pay a lower price, you get fewer options. Or maybe somebody else controls access to that API and you don't have access to do it. So you're spending hours doing manual things, going to a portal, exporting to Excel, bringing that down. We worked with a mortgage processor. Every Friday, they would go and they would download these multi-page tables. It would take them, an hour or more for somebody to do that they would then use in a mail merge. And so RPA is very attractive to them because it can take all that and automate it and scale it. So the fact that I can, if I've got one person and they're doing this, it's going to take that person 10 minutes to do this process. there's a limit on how many times that person can do that process. They might in an hour be able to do that process, say 5 times. What if we could scale that without having to hire a bunch more people and instead have a bot that scales across multiple VMs and can go and do that times 10, times 20, times 30? You can see how that can factor up to some very significant productivity gains. And so Microsoft is now in the Magic Quadrant leader category for robotic process automation. They are already in the leader quadrant for cloud DPA automation. So Microsoft is the only vendor that is a leader for both RPA and cloud automation. And Win Automation was not a new vendor. It's not like Microsoft is. Microsoft did try to build their own, and it was a flop. In 2019, when they rolled it out, it was not adopted by anybody I know. It was Selenium based, which was good, but it was just very rough edges, and there were a lot of things it could not automate. So it was kind of a no-brainer to acquire an established partner. I believe that Win Automation started the same year or the year after Blue Prism, like 2006. And so by doing this, Microsoft has already a very mature, very comparable platform to UiPath Automation Anywhere Blue Prism. And so it's immediately brought them into the leader quadrant. But also, they didn't just sit on it. They've made sizable investments, which we'll talk about, things like Process Advisor and other things like that, that really have helped to drive the platform forward. And you can see here, according to Gartner, it was the #3 search term last year. I find a lot of people use RPA as kind of synonymously with automation, with workflow. They really are a little bit different, but it just underscores how there are, even with Microsoft's dominance in the cloud, there still are a lot of very large automations that have to do with systems that can't be automated through the cloud. And that really positions Microsoft nicely as between the old and the new. The future is APIs, modern systems, but the reality is there's a lot of systems that, I mentioned, don't have APIs, that you can't access the API. You have a customer who automated Brightree. They're in the medical field, and Brightree is an example of, there's an API, but it's going to cost 20 cents per call or something crazy like that, which would add up to a huge price tag. So then using RPA, they could very easily scrape that data and do it at scale, while saving a lot of money. Who can use PAD? Who can use Power Automate Desktop? Anybody can use Power Automate Desktop. For one thing, if you have Windows 10 or Windows 11, you can use Power Automate Desktop locally on your computer, and all the functions in Power Automate Desktop are available. It's not limited at all. The limitation, which we'll talk about later, is the connection of cloud to desktop and scheduling it through cloud flows and triggering a desktop flow through a cloud flow and running it unattended. Those are all enterprise features for which you need to have a premium license. But there are a ton of things that you can do for automation within Windows that I do for cleaning up my desktop. I'll show you one in a little bit that I've done that uses local applications to download videos from YouTube. I've done them on my YouTube channel. I've got one where I simultaneously post a video to TikTok and YouTube, through Power Automate Desktop. It really positions, compared to even like the automation options that come with OS 10, which right next to my Windows machine, I have a Mac machine. It really is the most powerful desktop automation kind of standard feature in any operating system. There are some limitations, which we'll talk about. But then if you want to run this in more enterprise mode and have, say, cloud flows that are calling RPA processes, or scheduling them from the cloud, or scaling them via VMs, that's where premium licensing comes in. and we'll talk about that. I can go deep into the licensing if people want to talk about licensing tonight, or if that might be kind of a boring topic. So any questions about what I've talked about so far before we get into more of the show and tell?
I'm excited to see it.
Okay. Now, one thing I should say, I am going to use some recorded demos. I'm going to show you the flows, but when I run them, and that's partly because I have found that since desktop flows are running locally using local resources on your local computer, anything that interferes with the mouse or changes your screen resolution can interfere with it. Not that the platform isn't stable, but when you share it via Teams or Zoom or that kind of thing, it just adds an unpredictability. It's challenging as a developer or consultant to do demonstrations. Say you're developing something for a customer, if they want to see it run, if you're sharing it, everything's remote these days. So I make usage of recording and other things. Also, I think watching automations run can be boring because some of them take a while and you go through a lot of steps and a lot of things moving. And so that way I've been able to condense some of them because I didn't think you'd want to watch something scrape a 60-page table. You might, but again, you probably have better things to do. So one question I like to ask is, what should you automate? This is a question I get frequently. People have bought into automation. They say, we want to automate. We want to focus on what's most important to us. Then you say, okay, what are your priorities? What do you want to automate? And they say, I don't know. and Power Automate Desktop can actually help answer that question. I'll show that next. But some questions that I think make really good, can lead to the idea of what is a really good thing to automate is, where do your people spend the most time? What processes happen repeatedly and have high value? One good one that one of my customers asked was, what processes are frequently messed up? They had a return process that was frequently messed up, and this was for a consumer products electronics company. And if it's a return of a computer or a tablet or some high cost device and that's messed up, there's a lot of value there that can be lost. So they looked at, well, what are complex multi-step processes that are frequently messed up, and those were the candidates that they looked at to automate. So one thing where Power Automate Desktop can help is this thing called Process Advisor. And Process Advisor, so not only with Power Automate Desktop can you automate things, you also can analyze the processes to see where your biggest opportunities for optimization and automation are. And so I'm going to actually show you an example of this, but the idea would be, inside Power Automate, you can create a process and have multiple users record themselves doing this process. And there's built-in Power BI reports. You don't have to have a Power BI license to use them, that will show you kind of which parts of the process are taking the longest, and it will actually give you advice about how to build this, whether it should be a custom connector, if there's a standard connector, or if you should use RPA to do it. And so the process is, you create the process, you share it with several users, they record themselves doing the process, you classify the actions based on standard categorization, and then it will analyze it for you. I'm going to skip ahead because I got too many slides, as sometimes happen. This is an example of the output where you say had 5 people record this process. It will show you the thick lines are, this is what most people did. The thin ones are somebody specific is doing this action. What I love about this is, not only will it help you identify, hey, these are the things we should automate. The dark red, that's the part that's taking the longest. So in this part, adding the customer record is taking 34 seconds. Some of these are taking 11, 2. So that's, I know right there that would be a good place for me to focus on. What I love about this is, I might do this, have a process, say a processing an invoice or something like that, and I might say, you know what? Yeah, this might not be a good system to automate, but I can see, okay, what's this guy doing that's going, cutting 2 steps out of there? And from there, I can maybe decide to keep this manual but optimize it. So I find this something that we're using when we do what we call an automation envisioning session, where we have, again, we don't know which of these processes we should automate. So let's go through and let's take that and have several users do the process and then analyze what happened. So this is an example where, again, you got to click on Process Advisor over on the left side, and then you're going to create a new process. I believe this is GA. There are some parts of it, though. The data part is in preview. So I'm not going to go deep into the data, but there is a way to take data and to do the same kind of analysis. I haven't used that part yet. It's a preview feature. So you create the process, then you would have multiple users contribute a recording to that process. Now, in this case, I grayed out part of it because I'm simulating if you were going to go to your financial institution and download, say, a bank statement or something like that. You can do much longer processes, but the idea would be, and again, I'm not going to show you my login to my bank or anything like that, but the idea would be you'd have them go through, and the process recorder over here is going to record the keystrokes, record what they did, go through it, and go through. Again, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because, again, I don't want to show you how to log into my bank. And so from here, then you would go and click the mouse keystroke, click on the document link, and click the download link. Move that a little bit. So yeah. So again, just record yourself doing it. If they do some bad, first of all, if there's private information, they can click on one of the steps and mask it so that it's not recording the private keystrokes. They can also, you can also cut out redundant steps. I think I have a few of those there. But if they click the wrong thing, you can cut those out. And so I actually recorded it a couple times to simulate different users doing it. So you can see now it's analyzing the recording. And so I'm now going to go through and I'm going to classify the main parts of that. So opening the browser, logging in, clicking the download link, create those categories, those activities, so that you have standard classification so that when the analyze step goes, it knows how to group these different recordings together. The nice thing about recordings is I can skip ahead a little bit if it gets boring. Okay, so then I would go back and then I would classify the other recording too. So this person did it in less steps. You see there's less steps. So I'm going to go add the activities and you'll be able to select those categories or activities that you picked in the previous one. So then the end result is you now got a couple of recordings. And I think for best results, you should probably get 4, 5, 6 people to do it, so you can get a good, realistic idea of how. And then it's going to mine these processes and tasks so that you can then analyze them. And one common question I get about this, well, I don't know if we want to buy a license for everybody. We're analyzing we're trying the process out. You can actually use a trial environment, a trial of Power Automate Desktop to do this analysis. So this is the analysis. It's going to take several seconds, or sometimes if it's a more complex one, a little bit more. So you can see here, pretty much the same process is followed, but some were faster, some were slower. And so I can then see a lot of good information about the different variants. When I go into the application tab, I can actually change the filter to which recording it was. So if I had 5 of them, I can look at in total, and I can see, okay, if I went to the other one, that one password that I used in one, I didn't use in the other one. Then once you do that, hitting automate activities will take you to Power Automate, the flow maker experience, and it's going to actually then give you specific advice on if there's connectors you could use for this, if there's yeah, I clicked on it, but basically it will tell you if there's connectors you can use for it, if you should use a custom connector, if you should use RPA to do it. Let me see if I can go back to there, because yeah, so you can see this automate activities. It says, okay, here's for this, you could use, if there was actual connectors you could use, it would tell you that. It says you could use a custom connector, or you could use a desktop flow, and actually started a flow for me. So this could be very useful because, again, general rule, if there's an API or connector, we want to use that if possible. But then if there's not, that's where we would use either a custom connector or a desktop flow. So you can go in your environment, you can go to Process Advisor, and you can play with that today. So let's talk about some of the common actions, and there's a lot in there. I mean, we could be here for hours talking through every single type of action you can do with Power Automate Desktop. But I'm going to focus on a few that are very common: automating UI and applications, extracting data from a website, Excel operations, maybe a little PDF. How do you handle errors and retrying and being resilient with your desktop flows? So first of all, how do you get Power Automate Desktop? So if you have, again, Windows 11 Pro, it may come automatically installed with it. So, you know, I have one computer where it, you know, was my Surface, it was automatically on there. Whereas if you have Windows 10 or a version of Windows that doesn't come with it, you can go and download it and install it and use it in Windows. So this is Power Automate Desktop. I should mention, if you're using not the free version with Windows, but if you have a what's called a Power Automate per user plus attended RPA, that's a mouthful. But basically, if you have the premium license that includes RPA, excuse me, your flows, your desktop flows, will be stored in the cloud. So you can see here, it says environments, Joel Lindstrom's environment. So this corresponds to my environments in Power Automate. That way, you know, it's not just storing it locally on this device. If I log into Power Automate Desktop with another machine like my Surface, I see my same flows. I can run them on that machine. If I make a change to one, I instantly see those changes on other devices. I can monitor my desktop flows through PowerAutomate.com. If you go to your flows, you'll see different tabs. One of them will be desktop flows, one will be cloud flows, and you can see the failures just like you can analyze the flows. As far as governance over these, you know, traditionally things like the COE Starter Kit, DLP rules cover cloud connectors, custom connectors, other things like that. Microsoft has just come out in preview with a COE or Center of Excellence Starter Kit for automation, which adds a lot of capabilities for enterprises to control what actions can be done with desktop flows as well. So yeah, so the governance story and, you know, the cloud and being able to, these are stored in your Dataverse, in your environment, just like your cloud flows are. So if you restore and then backup, you get these back as well. Okay, so let's move into this and let's talk about some common actions. So first of all, I wanted to I'll pull up Power Automate Desktop again. And I want to get into some examples to show some of the common actions and how you might use them. So I'm going to first of all show you how I built this flow and then talk about some of the common actions. Then I can actually show you what it looks like as it runs. All right, so what I did, I hit the edit button. That pops up another window that is going to show me the steps with my Power Automate Desktop. This always goes a little bit slower when I'm sharing my screen, so apologies for that. Okay, so if you've never used Power Automate Desktop, let me familiarize you first with kind of the layout and what you can do with it. So first of all, over here are your actions. And like I mentioned, there's over 400 different actions. Just to mention a few that will be common, you'll be familiar with, even if you haven't used this. For example, things like variables. So just like with cloud flows, I can create variables for reusability. There's a lot of really great different types of variables beyond just simple text and number variables. And besides appending to a variable, you can actually manage lists in variables. You can have a whole, for example, when I scrape a table, you can scrape the contents of that table either to Excel or to a table. You can build lists inside of variables and add to those lists. You can change the sort order of the lists inside of a variable. Just a lot of things. And the variables that you have over here, you'll see the different variables that are created and you're using within this flow over here. Then conditionals, those are your if, your case, your switch cases. Very similar to how cloud flows work. And that's what I see is there's a lot of similarities between the different actions you have here. There's a lot of them that there's a corresponding action you have with that. Then loops, that would be like, for each, run until, loop condition, those types of things. So those are kind of your conditionals. Then you've got the flow controls, which are kind of like control flows. So I'm an old time, I used Scribe Insight, 12 years ago, right? And one thing I always loved about Scribe that I always wish that cloud flows would have would be kind of step control, which would be, if this doesn't do this, go to this step, skip this step and go to that step, or go back to this step. Well, Power Automate Desktop has that. So for example, I'll show you an example that's coming up where you can have a go-to step where if I want to check something and if this doesn't equal that, then go back to this step, or if this is true, skip to step 16. You can do that kind of thing and then control, stopping the flow, running subflows. There's subflows as well. So just like with cloud flows where you got parent-child, you can do the same kind of thing with Power Automate Desktop. You can create a subflow that you can reuse and call from multiple parent flows. A lot of things you can do with files, such as checking if a file exists somewhere, waiting for a file. Let's talk about the wait conditions because I've got some examples of this. So here's the scenario that I want to do for this. So when I do podcasts or other things or YouTube videos, sometimes I will, or maybe I watch a conference like the Microsoft Business Application Summit. I want to save that video for later. Now, I don't want to use this to do any kind of shenanigans like breaking copyrights, things like that. But I've had cases where I have a video on YouTube and I lose my local copy. I want to download a copy of it. So there's a number of ways to do this. A lot of the ways to save YouTube videos are a little bit on the, how should we put it, on the scary side. Like there's a lot of keep vid websites that'll get you all kinds of crap on your computer. But my favorite way to do it is using Videoland or the VLC player. You can actually, there's a number of steps you can go through where you basically start VLAN and you can put the network stream or the share URL of the video. Then you got to do something else, get the stream URL, put that in a browser, play it, save it. A number of steps you got to do. I can never remember the steps to do it. So what I did is I created a desktop flow that I can either copy a URL of a video, run this, and it goes through and does everything else for me. And so just walking through the steps to highlight a couple of things that I do here. There's different kinds of waits. So for example, you can have a standard wait. And again, sometimes you just want to wait for something to happen. But there are more intelligent waits that you can do. And this is how you can make your flow more resilient. Instead of just saying randomly wait 10 seconds, maybe you can wait for a file to appear in a folder. So for example, I have a flow that downloads a file like my bank statement one. Excuse me. But I want to close my browser when it's done. But I want to wait until the file's done downloading. Well, how do I do that? How will I know? I could say wait 10 seconds, but sometimes the file might take 20 seconds to download. So in this case, for example, the save as window, I found load, like open file, save file dialogues are some of the most tricky to work with because you can never predict how long it's going to take for them to appear. They're kind of a different window, so you have to realize that's there, switch focus to that control, and then do something in it. Well, one thing that this makes very easy is this wait for window step. So in this case, I have an operation that is going through, it's launching Microsoft Edge. It's hitting the Control S keyboard shortcut to launch the save dialog. But then I have a wait for window that's a wait for the save as window to appear, and then it'll do its thing. And then I would probably have a closed browser command here. So going back here, I was on a podcast. I was in sales before I was a Power Platform and Biz Apps person, and I sold maintenance software for a company called DataStream, which then became part of Infor. MP2, if anybody is familiar with that. So in this case, my old boss, John Sterling, I was on his podcast talking about my sales memories. And so I want to save that video. And so again, I have the video, the URL for the YouTube video. What this is going to do is load VLC, and it's going to then do keyboard shortcuts and other things to open that stream in VLC and hit the play button. It's going to then copy the URL, the stream URL, and then launch Microsoft Edge. You see it's got to get the clipboard text, so it's copying it. It will here from once it's playing. This is the media information, that location, that's the media stream URL, which is kind of like the playing the raw video. It's going to launch that. It had a step that will get the text from the clipboard, and see it launches the video, and then it's going to send the keyboard shortcut to save. This is another thing I learned about load save video. You don't have to click on the file and browse. You can actually have it if you enter the full file path in either the open or the save dialog, it will go to that location. So again, I was doing 3 or 4 keystrokes or mouse clicks where I realized that file field is already active. I can just enter in, send keystrokes, put the whole path in there, hit enter and go. And it saved a ton of time. So one thing I learned in doing desktop flows is look for the shortest path. So what I mean by the shortest path is instead of, for example, go to, if say you want to upload a file to YouTube, which I did, another one. Instead of going to YouTube, hitting the thing to upload the file, selecting the file, I realized, hey, you know what? I can go to, I think it's youtube.com upload, and it takes me directly to that page. So that's one other tip I would have to make your desktop flows easier. Look for the shortest path. So keyboard shortcuts, direct URLs to a specific subsite will save you a lot of hassle and make them run a lot faster too. And cut out steps so you don't have unnecessary steps there. Any questions about anything I covered there before I move to the next example?
Joel, we did have one question in the chat, just asking if it runs on Mac.
No, that is one area where, and probably what I see as for people that are not standardized on Windows, for example, using Linux or using other pieces like that, more Mac, and wanting to automate on those systems, it's probably are going to want to use another RPA tool, because I know like UiPath has the ability to run on Mac, and I believe Linux as well. So yeah, it's right now standardized on Windows, and that's where I don't think that it's on the immediate roadmap to bring in other platforms.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course, you can use Cloud Flows with Mac too. So again, we have a number of customers that use UiPath for RPA and use Cloud Flows for Office and other other things that there's a connector or API for. So again, keep that in mind. Okay,
Cool.
So let's talk about scraping data from a table like this. This is a real example, and I actually have kind of a two-step demo here. One is how to do scraping, and then the other one is more of a full, bigger scenario around it. This comes from medical insurance, where there's a lot of stuff, and this is a good example. If you want to get, say, Medicare information about what codes are covered by Medicare, there's not really a great API for that, or you may not have access to that. Other things like that. So that's where RPA can be very useful for dealing with government websites and other things where you don't have access through an API. This is, for example, the CPT codes, which are, for example, there's a couple of leading coding systems for medical procedures. One is the CPT codes, one is the HCPCS, HCPCS codes. And so, for example, this is an example where you might want to scrape this table and do something with it. Put in an Excel spreadsheet, bring it into a database, do something with it. And so I'm going to show you, first of all, how would you add a step to scrape a website. Okay, so I've got this scrape website flow that I started. So what I would do is I would have my first step be that I would, once this loads, I would launch a browser, and the browsers that are supported are Microsoft Edge, Chrome, Firefox, or Internet Explorer. Do not use Internet Explorer. Please don't use Internet Explorer. It's still there for people who use it for legacy processes. But I prefer the Chromium browsers, either Edge or Chrome. They seem to work the most reliably. So in this case, I'm going to launch a website. And so let's talk about launching a website. You have a bunch of options when you launch a website. So first of all, you will see you can choose launch a website, and you can either launch a new instance or you can attach to a running instance. So if I already had a browser open and I wanted a flow to kind of take over that session and do something, you do that. Typically, I'm going to launch a new instance. That's going to pop up a new browser. Initial URL, that is where you're going. You could also do a variable. So in the case, the last flow I showed you, you saw I copied something from VLC. I could then get the contents of the clipboard, which is what I did there. I got the contents of the clipboard to a variable, and then I set the initial URL to that variable. If I click that X, then I can choose any of my variables. In this case, I'm going to put that list in. You can have it, do I want to open normal? Do I want it maximized? Do I want it minimized so it's not taking over my screen? All that stuff you can do. And advanced, you have the option to, do I wait for the page to load before it moves on? That's a really important one because you might be calling control that isn't there. If a pop-up dialog appears, some of those sites like Medicare, occasionally you get a pop-up and you can say, okay, if a pop-up appears, close it. You can also, sometimes that isn't quite enough. Sometimes for specific types of websites, I might do, after the web page loads, I might do a check for a specific control, like there might be another type of pop-up or something. So you can go beyond that. But for standard pop-ups, this is a good one. This is a good one to do. And it creates a variable. By default, that's browser. What that's useful for is you might have multiple web processes going on. You might launch browser 1, you might launch browser 2, and this gives you a way then when you do something within a window, within a browser, such as scraping a table, you can tell it which session you want to use. So in this case, I'm just opening one browser. So I'm going to say variables produced and just go with the standard browser. So that's what that means. So once that's there, then under the browser automation, you have web data extraction. And the first option is extract data from web page. So you can actually get a lot more advanced than that. So for example, I have a use case where we want to do that conditionally if a certain text phrase appears on it. So in that case, we could do get the details of the web page, check condition, and then conditionally extract the data if this condition is true. Take screenshot of web page, you can actually do a screenshot with this. So if you find yourself in that case, I'm going to do the most common one, which is extract data from a web page. Okay. When you do that, it will pop up and you see it will say which instance to use. So if there were multiple, it would give you a drop down where you can pick that. And then variable, from where to store the data. I can either store the data as a variable, meaning put it in a variable, let me do something with this list of data later, or as an Excel spreadsheet. And that way you can pop up an Excel spreadsheet and write the data to an Excel spreadsheet. And so variables produced, it's going to produce a variable. If you do variables, if you do Excel spreadsheet, it will choose which Excel instance. Just like the browser instance, this is going to give me the ability, if I have multiple spreadsheets open, I can say which one to use. We'll talk a little bit later about error handling, but every step you do has the choice of what to do if there's an error. Do you want to continue or do you want to throw an error? And for example, if I want to throw an error, I can write that error somewhere for logging purposes or alert someone. And it gets you can do some advanced stuff like, okay, we couldn't extract data, then we can create rules around that. We couldn't launch the Excel instance, create rules around that, retry, other things like that. Okay, so once you do that, let me do that one more time. You'll notice you don't see an option to of, okay, well, where do we want to scrape it from? There's this thing called the Live Web Helper, which I'll show you a little video of. What you would do is you would pull that website up in a browser session, and then when you click off of it, the Live Web Helper automatically appears. That then lets you choose what you want to extract from, whether it's a field, whether it's a whole table, whether it's a multi-page table, that kind of thing. So in this example, I've got that CPT code list. What I've done is I've added the step and clicked off of it to my browser session. I want to highlight one thing. There's this and it's not showing in this session here, but there is a browser plugin. I've got too many extensions here, so that's why you can't see it. But there is let me switch over to my other browser, to my Edge session. It's the same with Edge or with Chrome. But there is, you'll see up here, Power Automate, the Power Automate symbol. What you want to do is when you install Power Automate Desktop, it will install a browser plugin and an extension. You can actually go to the Chrome store and install it if it doesn't get installed, but you're connected if it's lit up. If it's gray, white, it's not connected. So maybe you're logged out, restart your browser, check your extension, make sure it's logged in. The Live Web Helper will not work if you have this. This is where if you're like me and have a bunch of different browser profiles, you might find yourself where you're launching a browser, but it's a different profile that extension isn't connected under. That's why I would recommend if you're developing RPA processes, I would use a browser that you don't have a bunch of different profiles in, or at least the environment it runs is, because you'll minimize because if you're switching between browser profiles, it's super easy to switch to a profile that the extension isn't connected on, and then your process will die. So basically, again, maybe you're using Edge for your bunch of different profiles. Maybe you choose to use Chrome and only have one main profile there that you have the extension running as. But it's just cleaner to do it that way. You also don't want to have a bunch of windows open to different things for attended RPA. It just gets messy. But anyway, so again, I add the extract data from website, and then I click off of that while leaving that step open, and then the Live Web Helper appears. So then what you can do, there's like a basic or an advanced mode here. So you'll see here that as you move your mouse around the web page, you see the divs, you see the tables, you see the fields, all the different things. So using the live web helper, you select, in this case, the table, and would right click and choose either extract HTML table if you want to get the entire HTML table, or element value if you want to get a specific value from it. And while I was recording this, I got a little timeout because I had too much stuff running on my machine. So the error message that appears during this is not Microsoft's fault. It's my fault for having too much stuff running as I was trying to do this. But you'll see here, after it spins a little bit, when you choose extract entire table, again, you got to choose the table and then right click, and then or whatever you want. If it's a field, you can extract a single field value, you can extract a whole table. You'll actually see a preview of the contents of that table, and then once you select it, it's going to appear in the extraction preview. What I really like about that is there's no guesswork involved. I don't have to wonder, did it capture correctly? And this is what I'm talking about. I just had too much stuff running on there. But you'll see here exactly, yeah, is that right? It's not going to show the whole table, but it will show the first 20 items of the table. I can see, like, sometimes you'll get, and then if you go to advanced mode, you can also work directly with the CSS selector. So if you're comfortable with the DOM of the website, and I'll show you an example of how to get that. Thanks to my colleague Ramiro Melgoza for showing me the advanced technique here. This is one thing that amazes me about the platform, because it's such a mature platform. It's not a brand new platform. It's got a lot of great capabilities, but unfortunately the documentation hasn't always caught up with some of the more advanced capabilities. You talk to somebody who's used Power Automate Desktop or Win Automation for years, and they will tell you some tricks that will save you a ton of time. So in this case, I've moved now. I like the live web helper in selecting the item, but as you saw, it's kind of easy to click off of what you want and right click on the wrong thing. Where if you're comfortable working with the developer mode in Chrome or Edge Chromium, you can be a lot more precise about it. So this structure here. Let me show you how you might get that without having to, you could click directly into the advanced mode if you want to. So I'm going to go into, now, a lesson that I would like you to learn, that I learned the hard way, is if you buy a Logitech keyboard, buy one that F12 actually works on, because I have one of these great keyboards that will switch between devices, but I cannot for the life of me get F12 to work. So I've got to do the other keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-I to go into developer mode, or you can go through the many menus in Edge. So what you can do is you can go and do the item selector here, and then you can select the element, for example, there. Then you see this table right there. It's going to select the table right there. I can then go and click the three dots, go to copy, and I want copy full XPath. Now let me open Notepad. You can use whatever you want, but let me open Notepad. And I'm going to paste in, sorry for the dark mode if this is hard to see. I'll zoom in a little bit so it's easy to read. Okay, so it'll look like this. I don't want it formatted like this. First of all, I'm going to delete that first one, and then I'm going to go and do replace, and replace the / with space less than space, and hit replace all. This is exactly what you want. And so again, if you're comfortable with that, you can take this, then when the live web helper comes up, copy this and go to advanced mode in the live web helper, paste that in, and choose entire table. So again, you can do it again. If you're not comfortable with that, use the live web helper. If on the other hand, you're comfortable with the DOM and with developer mode, this is one way that you can more precisely, without having to click the exact right place in the live web helper, can capture this, and then go back into the live web helper advanced mode, paste this in, hit OK, and go.
Nice.
Okay. Any questions about that?
That's pretty cool.
Okay. So I'm going to go back and so now that we know how to scrape that then will give me that I can write it to a spreadsheet. I can do other things. Let's talk about Excel actions, because Excel is one area that I think desktop flows are much more powerful with Excel than cloud flows. And cloud flows can do a lot with Excel, but for example, if I want to populate or read from an Excel spreadsheet with cloud flows, it pretty much has to be formatted as a table. There's a couple things you can do, but generally you want it formatted as a table. A lot of spreadsheets are not formatted as a table. So if I want to populate data into a spreadsheet, if I want to create a new tab in the spreadsheet, if I want to create a spreadsheet, find the next available cell, enter data in, that kind of thing. Power Automate Desktop has a lot of powerful Excel functions, including things that you can't do through the connector or API. So I'm going to go back. Let's close this one out and go to another flow. So taking what we just learned with scraping the website, I want to do a lot more than just get the CPT code list. I want to get 3 or 4 other things and put them into a consolidated Excel spreadsheet. I might have somebody in billing or somebody like that I need to have the most recent codes, and I need to have other pieces from, say, Medicare or other insurance sites. And so I'm going to use Power Automate Desktop to not only scrape websites, but also combine them together into a spreadsheet, and that I can then have a consolidated kind of medical code report, if you will. So let me clean up my act here and close some of these windows. And I'll talk you through this one. It's quite a lengthy process. Or actually, that's the wrong one. Let me open that one instead. Okay, so you can see this is a little bit longer of a process here. So high level, what I wanted to do is there's a couple different places where, for example, on Medicare, if I want to download the national coverage database, it's actually a zip file that has multiple CSV files in it. Then if I want to get that CPT code list, that's a website I want to get that table from. And then there's another set of codes that I want to get from another site. I want to combine these into a multi-tabular Excel spreadsheet. So in this case, I'm doing a bunch of different things. I'm downloading that file. I'm unzipping the file. I'm deleting the zip file. I'm reading from the CSV. I'm copying that to an Excel. I'm scraping that website. I'm doing all this. In the meanwhile, I'm cleaning up my act and saving and closing it. You're closing the web browsers, deleting the file. So at the end of this process, I will have unzipped the file, put it in a spreadsheet, gotten the information from the website, and consolidated all this down into a single Excel spreadsheet that somebody can then do something with. And some of this happens. I don't have everything popping up, so you're not going to see every step, but it's some of it's happening in the background. That's where I love it. You can, especially if it's an attended flow, you don't necessarily want everything popping up in front of you. So you can see very quickly it's downloaded that file. It's waited for the file to download, unzipped the file locally, deleted the zip file after I did it, and then got the CSV file for the national coverage database, opened Excel behind this screen. It's written the contents of that to the Excel, and then you're going to see the web page pop up here with those codes that it's going to copy to the Excel. And then one of my lessons is clean up your act. If you're opening windows, if you're launching Excel, if you're copying things, once you're sure that's done, close those, because if you don't, you'll have artifacts left over. Resource will be taken up on the machine. Next time the flow runs, it might not run correctly. So the great thing is you can do all that. I love that you can, for example, download a file, wait for that file to be done, then close the browser, like we just did there. So you saw that was the actual runtime. It runs in 15 seconds or less. And you open up the Excel spreadsheet that it created here, and there was no editing in that video at all. You can see it's got 3 tabs in the in there. One is that CPT code list. One of them is the HCPC code list, and one of them is also then the national coverage database for the internal Medicare codes. And that's the kind of thing that, as an old-time Cloudflow guy, seeing all this stuff happen in front of my eyes, it's just magical. I mean, there's nothing, really revolutionary about what just happened. But if you can imagine, something like that, with, sometimes hundreds or thousands of lines happening at scale, multiple times an hour or hundreds of times per day, would be, that's pretty awesome. So one thing to consider that is a factor is licensing, API call limits. I love Cloudflows, but if you use a Cloudflow, every line, every step in a Cloudflow consumes an API call, including declaring variables, appending to variables, compose steps. A lot of these steps, you'll see Cloudflows that have 40, 50, 60 steps. And you got to realize that at scale, if you have, say, per user or per app licenses, or per user flow licenses, you might have 40,000 API calls. But if you consider something that runs for thousands of records, you can hit limits with the API call limit. You can find yourself being pushed to a higher cost tier or having to buy more API calls. There's definitely a case where desktop flows, even unattended flows with the per bot cost, can have significant cost savings. I don't think that's the reason to use them, but if you're processing a lot of data, crunching a lot of Excel data, like downloading, scraping a table of 100, 200,000 records to do something with, that you could then put into SQL using a script or using SSMS or PowerShell or whatever, that can be a very appealing in some cases. Other things, for example, OCR. I love AI Builder for smart, intelligent OCR, for example, AP processing, that kind of thing. But the downside in some cases is there's a cost per page. If I don't need the intelligence, if I just need to take text and turn it into something in a database or something like that, or take a form and take the text and do something with the text to analyze it without needing the AI, Power Automate Desktop will do OCR, and pretty good OCR as well. So I have seen cases where we combined, in some cases we need AI Builder and need the intelligence that it brings, but in some cases certain applications just need dumb OCR, if you will. In that case, let's leverage Power Automate Desktop for that at scale, more bread and butter type of OCR. And the great thing is they work together, so I don't have to do either or. I can have the things that are best for Cloudflows, best for APIs, best for AI, use Cloudflows and AI Builder, and the things that are at scale, desktop, local, no API, or for cost savings, I can use desktop flows. So the next example, and again, how are we doing on time here?
I think we are starting to push up against. We're scheduled till 8:15, right, Eric?
Yeah, I think we're okay.
All right, so let me get into some best practice. I've got 2 or 3 more examples if you want to see them. But in
I want to see
them. In interest of time, best practice, I already touched on some of these. Clean up after yourself, close windows when you're done, those types of things. I would say use smart wait conditions. Don't just say wait for 5 seconds, wait for 10 seconds. Use things like wait for file, wait for window, wait for control. You can wait till some control is available. When possible, do that. That will make your process cleaner and more resilient. Let's talk about error handling. I showed you on each step there's an error handling settings that you can get very specific with. One though that is is another good one is we did a process that went to SAP HANA's portal, and this is an example. They didn't want to use the API for cost savings. They wanted to just go to the portal and download the CSV file. But the date selector, if it's a standard text field, it's pretty straightforward to work with. But some fields like combo boxes, date controls are these weird controls that aren't just a text field, they're more of an intelligent field. And sometimes they're a little bit tricky to work with. For example, that one, it would usually work, but sometimes due to a timing or a quirk, it would, halfway enter the data. So we needed a way to make sure before we continued that it actually entered the right value in. So let me show you, I'm not going to run this flow, but I'm just going to show you the approach that we use for this. So in this case, I believe it's this one. What I did is I put in a check, an if condition, that would check to see, does this field contain the data I wanted to do? And if it didn't, I went back and retried. So it became much more resilient then, because in the fluke case that field did not get properly updated or a timing thing or whatever, it would go back and no, I'm sorry, it was I have two similar. So lesson learned: name your flows appropriately. I think it's maybe that's the one I clicked.
That's the old quote from computer science. There's only 2 hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things.
So, yeah, okay, so right here, and again, this might be hard to see, but there's this thing called a label. And the label is a step that doesn't do anything, but it creates kind of a placeholder that you can reference and jump to, if you will. And so it's also useful for putting descriptive text for what's going on, that kind of thing. But I create a label called populate date, which is, this is where I start populating date. I focus on that field, then I send the keystrokes, and then then I get the value of that field. My condition is if this value does not equal the desired text, go back and do it again. So the great thing is then once I ran it, then it would check and validate that field was set correctly, and then it would go back and do it if it didn't. So that's another way you can make your desktop flows retry, more resilient, other things like that. Big one is test an environment that's similar to where it's going to be run. If you have a very high resolution desktop that you're building this in, and then you're moving it into a VM that has a lower resolution, that can make the flow not run correctly where you are, because again, it's very much dependent on the settings and the resolution of the machine. So as much as possible, develop and test an environment with the same, similar specs from a resolution perspective, window sizing, etc., as to where it's going to be run. Or move it in there, test it thoroughly. Keyboard shortcuts. If it's intended RPA, for example, I built another flow that would upload a video to YouTube. And if you do the YouTube upload, you can know, it's a multi-step dialogue that is, it's just hard to work with. A Power Automate desktop doesn't like iframing, for example, so it can be hard to select items. So what I did is I went through and said, if I didn't have a mouse, how would I do this? So I noticed it starts in the first one, then you go tab, and then you had a selector for, is this for kids? Yes, no. You could do the up, down button, tab, hit space, go to the next one. And what I did is when that came up, I used the send keys step, and basically you can do, you know, modifiers like Control S, you can do all this stuff, and it made it very quick, very fast. The one caveat to that is send keys doesn't work dependably in unattended because it's running kind of headless there. And so, but for attended, I love keyboard shortcuts and send keys because it can make it very quickly. If it's working with an unattended RPA, there you want to more select the field or select the item with the mouse. And again, it might just take a little bit more testing to get that to work right. But again, if you're doing an intended one like I do for my desktop, you know, I will save many steps by doing send keys and just mimicking the keyboard steps that I would do in a single step. So let's talk about working with the cloud plus desktop. So if you, first of all, if you did this 6-8 months ago, you're familiar with it, you had to have the on-premise gateway. Best thing that's happened ever, in my opinion, is the ability to do this without the gateway. Nothing against the gateway, it's just one more thing to get approved by your IT for, you know, firewall rules, all that. It's, you know, it's a pain in those cases, especially enterprise companies. And so now you have the ability to create a trust with your machine and with Power Automate in the cloud. So then once you do this, you go to machine settings and you basically choose which environment you want it to be triggerable by, and then you will be able to select this machine from cloud flows in that environment. Some caveats. This doesn't work if you have Windows 10 Home. So I had a machine, I could not see machine settings anywhere, and I knew I had a license for it. I realized, wait, I've got Windows 10 Home. This needs Windows Pro. You also have to have a premium license like the Power Automate Desktop plus Attended RPA in order to call cloud flows, desktop flows from the cloud. Logging into your computer from the cloud, you have to be a local admin. You can't just use a Microsoft account. You have to have either a computer name / login or domain / login, and you have to be a local admin on it. If you have a Microsoft account, I've switched my computer over to using a local admin account just for that fact. You can pass variables from the cloud. Again, don't have time to get into that. Attended versus unattended. So with attended, it's running in front of you on a machine that you're logged into. Unattended, you can't be logged into it because it's launching and running on that device or a number of different VMs. It's just how you can scale it. If you create a bot and you are running it, you always want to start as attended because you can then test it, watch it run. But once you test it, then you can switch calling that as to an unattended flow as long as you have licensing for it. We'll talk about licensing if we have time here. There is no additional cost on adding VMs. Some RPA platforms you pay based on how many nodes you have. There isn't an incremental cost, so it's really no more other than the cost of your Azure or AWS or whatever type of VM you're running on. Scaling that out, there's no additional cost from a licensing perspective if you want to have something scaled to 10, 20, 30 VMs. The important thing is all VMs in the cluster need to use the same login. And you can use, there's traffic rules and prioritization, so you can have it, you can control how it distributes that, but basically all of them need to use the same login and function as the same person. So what are the limitations of the free version? So all actions, all Power Automate desktop actions are there. The big limitation is you can't call a desktop flow from a cloud flow. There currently isn't really an official way to schedule them. You basically have to go to the pad and click run to run the automation. There are some tricks though. And the most common one I see is create a desktop flow and have the first step be wait for keyboard input. And you can make your own keyboard shortcuts. So when I turn my machine on, I go immediately and run this flow, and it sits there waiting in the background for a keyboard. So in essence, you can create new keyboard shortcuts for Windows, and then after that wait condition, then do your action. And the last step would be that go-to step and go back to the beginning. So in essence, you can have, again, and I pass this feedback to them that, hey, you should have some way for me to schedule these either through Windows Scheduler, PowerShell, etc., keyboard shortcut. And it's something that I think we will have someday. I don't know if it's in the roadmap or not, but for now, it's still pretty powerful. And again, you just got to remember to run the flow. And even if you manually launch them, it can save a ton of time if it, like the downloading YouTube video thing. If it's something that takes you multiple steps, multiple times, it still can, even if you have to manually start it, it can still be useful for, desktop cleanup or multi-step actions you do locally. And it's also a great way to learn it because, again, you're not limited in any capability in Power Automate Desktop. You can use the whole thing for free as part of your Windows account. So use it as your opportunity to learn the platform. Very briefly, licensing. Okay, so as I mentioned, everybody can use Power Automate Desktop for free as part of their Windows account. For people, if you want to use it more of an enterprise grade, if you want to make Power Automate Desktop flows and you want to, have them called from a Cloudflow, what you're going to want is this $40 a month Power Automate per user with attended RPA. And that gives you the ability to call attended flows from Cloudflows. So then you have really all the power to do that. Once you do that, if you want to have unattended bots, that's where if you click this link, you'll see the cost. There's not really a per user cost for that. In that case, it's a per bot cost of $150 per month. And again, that may sound expensive, but it's very much in line with other RPA platforms. But also, since there's not a per user cost, everybody in your company can benefit from an unattended RPA bot. So again, if you look at that, especially high volume, complex bots, that can be cheaper than Cloudflow if it has a lot of steps, if it's processing a lot of data, or if a lot of people are benefiting from it. So again, that's where I think, again, it also quite frequently for people who are on UiPath Automation Anywhere, where those are RPA first, quite frequently people moving from Automation Anywhere or UiPath can save a lot of money because while you will still have some unintended bots, you'll be able to move a lot of those bots to Cloudflows, which are cheaper than RPA processes. And so, we have I see people automating Office with RPA bots, and that's crazy because you got Cloudflows, and those can be done as part of a standard Office or Teams license. Okay. So let me put my contact information back up. I'm glad to dig into any specific scenarios with you. If you are looking for advice or advice on how to learn the platform, what I would say is Microsoft Learn's your friend. Learn.microsoft.com. There's some great content there on there. And the biggest thing is download it. Find something manual you do on your desktop and automate it. Like downloading from your bank or downloading your Amazon purchase history or something like that. Find something you do and automate it. All right. Any questions before we wrap up?
Thanks, Joel.
I had a question, quick.
Yeah.
Have you tried this for like testing, QA testing for Dynamics 365, for example? Do you think this is a good solution?
It can be. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've for example, I haven't done a lot, but one project we did, and this was specifically for, like you said, it wasn't Dynamics, but it was actually, for example, Power Apps, Canvas apps have the Power Apps Test Studio, but there's some things that it can't test. And so looking at this as one of the options, you have it go through, and if an action fails, write. In that case, if we were writing to a notepad, you could have it go through, certain keystrokes. You can have it go through either keyboard shortcuts or clicking things with the mouse, and you log on failure if certain things fail. So yeah, I think it can be a really good option there. For Dynamics, I would look first of all to Easy Repro and Selenium, being that's that's something that is more part of the platform. But again, if you want something quick and easy, and you want to use this for UI testing, yeah, I think it definitely could be. It could be. You're just going to have to record the process. I didn't get into the process recorder. There's multiple ways for building that, which are very similar to other RPA platforms. But yeah, I think that is one use case that we have seen people do with it. Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very good question.
And especially, think about it. Since you can use it for free in Windows, you could, if a tester wanted to create a record an RPA process of going through something, and the beautiful thing is you can watch it happen. So again, it can be an aid to, I think, not only unit testing, but also maybe UAT testing. If you wanted to record the process, watch it happen, see that it looks the way you want it to. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a good, that kind of gives me a question, Joel. If I was going to download my bank statement, would I do that through the process recorder and then tweak it if necessary, or would I try to manually create it?
Yeah, so there are kind of three levels of that. The process recorder is the easiest. So try the process recorder first. That's kind of what Microsoft recommends. What I've found is use the process recorder first and then look at it. What you will find is every time I do the process recorder, I pick up extra clicks. So then delete the clicks that were extra. Then play it back. If it works, great. If it doesn't, that's when I would then look at what failed. And the kind of second level is to manually identify the object. And again, different websites are different. So some of them work very well. Other websites have more dynamic controls on them, and that's when I've found I've had to more precisely select the item. And once you get familiar with it, like a lot of times, if I need to do 3 or 4 things, I'll just manually do the steps. But getting started, the process recorder is easier. Then the last and kind of more advanced way is what I showed, kind of getting into the DOM and the Xcode of the page of capturing the actual element and manually defining that. So again, you probably don't have to do that, but keep that in mind that if you do the recorder, or if you use the helper to select the item and it's still not working, then I would look at the definition of the page. Sometimes, as well, the recorder or the other things pick up additional parts that you don't need, and you can kind of simplify those and take Joe Unwin, who works for Hitachi. He has some really good things about making your RPA processes resilient on his blog. I would highly recommend it.
All right. Do you have a link maybe to post that we can post in the chat?
I think it's flowjoe.io. Let me check here.
Certainly catchy.
Yeah, just Google FlowJoe. You will find him very quickly.
Yeah.
Power Automate functions. Yep, got it.
Yeah, probably the best Power Automate blog out there. Better than Microsoft. All right. Well, I've got to run. Let me put my contact information back up. And again, if you have can it listen to Windows sounds? Oh, I don't think so. It can play sound. So it's like I had this dream that when I enter the room, Superman theme would start playing or something. You could actually do something like that. Think of it, if you had like the geo features in Cloud Flows calling a desktop flow that then played it. You can play a song, play a sound. So yeah, you can do it. I don't know that it can listen to local sounds though.
Because I was thinking I would check the voicemail on my phone app.
Yeah, maybe.
Nice.
And then save the recording and email it to me so I don't have to do roaming with my phone.
Yeah. And I would say this is one last thing, and I told my team this. I think Power Automate Desktop, for people that are interested in building their brand and potentially becoming MVPs, this is a prime area for people to write blogs, do videos, just because so much of the content out there on Power Automate is on Cloudflows for good reasons, because it's been there a long time, that there's not a lot of content or as much content being produced on this. So there's so many things you can do that if you're looking to specialize, do more presentations, build your brand, potentially become a super user in the power users community or an MVP someday, this would be a great area to focus on.
Yeah, and it's fun, and you get to interact with users.
Yeah, and if you look at it, you're not just, hey, here's how you use Power Automate Desktop, but hey, here's how to solve common problems that you have or to save yourself time. I think Power Automate Desktop is going to grow exponentially by the fact it's included in Windows. So think of all the Windows 11 people are going to discover it, and your content would be very valuable to them.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Joel.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
Hey, Aaron, you want to do the wrap up?
Yes. So, Joel, is this the part where you tell us that your entire presentation was automated through RPA?
I wish, no, but that would be cool, though.
Joel is sitting on a beach right now in the Caribbean, and he just pressed a button, and this ran. No, thank you very much, Joel. We appreciate it, and thanks for staying late and sharing all of this information. Obviously, we could probably go on for another hour here. So, much appreciated. All right, so I think we have our next slide here, right, Eric?
Yeah.
All right, I'll even come back on the TV here. All right. So, as we've been mentioning in our last few meetups, we're going to be transitioning to the Power Platform user groups. We already have 50 members signed up, and we're looking to get more people over there before we switch off of the meetup, or basically deprecate the meetup groups. So if you haven't done so already, please switch over to the Power Platform user group. The QR code is on the screen right now. That can help simplify your registration process. And at the moment, all events are posted on both the Meetup and the Power Platform community groups. All right, we have a few announcements. In the last few days, Microsoft published the Dynamics and Power Platform release plan for 2022, Release Wave 1. So you can find that out there on Microsoft Docs. The documentation is out and ready to learn about, and that'll help you learn about upcoming changes. All right, we are still working on our details for our next event. It's going to be, basically we're working on doing these events every month. So our next one will be in March. And we are working on securing a speaker and a topic. We always look forward to hearing your input and seeing if you have any subjects that you're interested in. So feel free to send that along to us. And even if you're interested in presenting, if you have a topic that you're working on or something that you've learned that you want to share with the community, by all means, we're happy to entertain that. So please let us know. And that's really it. So just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Joel, again for joining us. And thank you to all my fellow organizers, Eric, Mihir, and Arun.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thanks,
Joel.
everyone. Thank you, Joel.